Good morning, everyone. My name is Danny Leung. I am an account manager for the Energy Network, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. First of all, I just want to say thank you for joining us so early in the morning and taking some time off of your busy schedules to attend this webinar. I think this will be very informative for you guys and to learn more about the new standards that will impact home upgrade. Joining me today at this on this webinar is Neil Sistek. He is the project manager for RHA, who is the quality control and inspection team for the Energy Network. So to get started, during this webinar, you will learn about the impacts of the new ANSI/BPI 1200 standards on the Energy Network's offering of home upgrade. We will be going over the changes in testing procedures as well as going over a new calculator tool that will be used that incorporates these new changes, and also contractors, you guys will be using it when you guys are applying for whole building air sealing. So today for the webinar, everyone currently is put on mute. If you guys have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to type them into the chat box, and we will respond to everyone that have attended this webinar and signed up for this webinar. We'll respond and answer all those questions in a separate email immediately after this webinar. Okay. So, oops, sorry about that. So to get started, the new ANSI/BPI 1200 standards came into effect this year. The standards really only impact a BPI building analyst combustion safety test, and as you know, our program is, sorry. Okay. So as you know, our program is based off of testing by measure. So basically, in our program, combustion safety testing from a BPI building analyst is only required when applying for whole building air sealing, attic insulation, and plane sealing, windows, and wall insulation. So meaning, if you do any of these measures, this is when these standards take into effect. If you do anything like an HVAC replacement only, or if you only do an HVAC replacement, like these standards won't affect your testing because you're not required to do combustion safety testing when you do an HVAC replacement. So I guess right now I will hand it off to Neil, and he will go over all the changes.
Good morning, everyone. Neil Sistek here. I'd like to start with, let's see, Danny, can I get control? Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Can we advance the slide? It's not working from my end. As you know, BPI 1200 became effective in January of this year, and the program is now finalizing our adoption of those standards. And as Danny said, this affects, this coordinates with the test by measure features of the program. And when those combustion safety changes take effect, these are the tests that actually are affected by BPI 1200 draft testing: spillage, undiluted carbon monoxide action levels change, worst case depressurization testing actually goes away. And we'll go over each of these individually. Fireplace damper clamps are now required, and today we're going to spend most of our time on new mechanical ventilation calculations. Draft testing has been eliminated in the 1200 standards. We're not seeing a lot of draft testing in the field now due to the prevalence of direct vent appliances and B vents that are, there's been some lack of clarity on drilling or not drilling B vents. So the draft testing has been eliminated, and the standards really rely on spillage testing for to adequately test whether appliances are venting or not, venting properly. Spillage testing at 1 minute has been eliminated. The program is adopting the standard for 5 minutes. It's more of a steady state test for the appliance, and simplifies matters a little bit out in the field, eliminating the 1 minute test. In undiluted carbon monoxide action levels, the recommended action levels have been eliminated. These action levels used to be based on whether draft and or spillage failed or passed under worst case or natural conditions. Now that we're not testing for draft, these action levels take effect based on spillage only. So as you can see from this chart, the actual action levels themselves have not changed. It's just the recommendation for service has gone away. Worst case depressurization limits and worst case depressurization testing have also been eliminated. They've found that, I think there was a Lawrence Berkeley lab study that found that these limits were somewhat arbitrary for different types of appliances in different conditions. So they have actually done away with the limits altogether. And again, spillage is the important test here to tell if an appliance is adequately venting. It's important to note that worst case depressurization setup is still required, and that is for open combustion appliances, required for appliance ambient carbon monoxide testing, and it's required for undiluted carbon monoxide testing. The worst case depressurization limits and tests have gone away, but the setup is required for these other tests. This is a new rule that's come into effect with the standards, and it requires the installation of Fireplace damper clamps on gas inserts and fireplaces. These are for gas fireplaces and inserts, gas-fueled appliances only, and it's an indoor air quality and safety measure, preventing the accidental use of one of these appliances with the damper fully closed. Did we skip a slide here, Danny? Sorry. So most of the rest of the time this morning is going to be spent on mechanical ventilation. The trigger for mechanical ventilation actually remains the same as in the old BPI standard, where the blower door test showing a result that is less than 70% of BAS will trigger the requirement for installed mechanical ventilation. And again, the recommendation for installation of mechanical ventilation happens when the blower door test result is between 70% and 100% of BAS. This is the ASHRAE 6289 standard. The actual calculation of the amount of mechanical ventilation that's required for a house is based on ASHRAE 62 2013. And that's where some of the complications come in the calculations. 62-2013 has a series of calculations that you have to run through that are a little bit complicated, but the program is providing a calculator that allows you to just enter a few numbers, a few more than you were doing previously with the 6289 standard. But what I'd like to do is kind of review what those calculations are based on, and then we'll do a review of the calculator. This calculator is necessary for anyone who's doing building air sealing. It's going to be a required document to be submitted with your other documents. Basically, there are three calculations to come up with the airflow that's required for a home. The first initial ventilation airflow is based on conditioned floor area, number of bedrooms, and number of occupants. It's kind of similar to the previous calculation. There's also a local exhaust adjustment. Local exhaust meaning the existing local exhaust relates to kitchen exhaust and bathroom exhaust. The ASHRAE has, well, we'll go over those. We'll go over that individually in just a moment here. That's based on the number of kitchens and full bathrooms in the house, and as well as the operable windows, openable and operable windows in those kitchens and bathrooms. And it's based on what the existing mechanical ventilation airflow is if fans are already installed. There is a credit for infiltration. If a house is very leaky, obviously less mechanical ventilation is going to be required. It's that infiltration is also based on the number of stories in a home and the geographic location of the house. So individually on these calculations, it's very slow to advance. That initial ventilation airflow, the first calculation I mentioned, these are the numbers. You don't really need to know these numbers. As I said, the calculator is going to do this for you. We're looking at conditioned floor area, the number of bedrooms, or the number of occupants. The local exhaust airflow adjustment looks at kitchens and full baths. Full bath meaning that it has to have the bathroom has to have a shower or a tub. ASHRAE 62-2013 requires that a kitchen has 100 CFM of exhaust and a bath has 50 CFM of exhaust. And as I mentioned, operable windows, you get credit for an operable window. As well as, and then this calculator, there's another factor in there that is built into the calculator that takes a quarter of that required amount and adds that to your initial airflow requirement. The existing ventilation in a home, if there are existing kitchen fans and bath fans, and you have the ability to measure the airflow in those fans, that can reduce the required mechanical whole house mechanical ventilation that is required to be installed. If you don't measure those, you can still use the calculator. We can still proceed, but if you don't measure the existing fans, your required airflow may be a bit higher. These are a few of the tools that you can use to measure existing exhaust airflow. Again, it's optional. But some of these tools, such as the Energy Conservatory's duct blaster, can be used as a powered capture hood. Other tools, such as a handheld anemometer, is a relatively inexpensive tool that can be used to capture the existing exhaust airflow. Some of these other tools are more expensive. Some of them you may already have. The point being that if you desire to measure the existing exhaust airflow to reduce the required size of the fan that needs to be installed for whole house ventilation, that's an option you can go with. The last bit of this calculation is an infiltration credit. And as I mentioned, a very leaky home is going to reduce the amount of airflow that's required for mechanical ventilation. There's a couple of constants and factors that are in here. One of them is what's called the weather station factor. And it is essentially, you need to identify the location of the weather station that's geographically closest to your project, and use the weather station factor that's associated with that weather station. These are the, it looks like there's about 10 or 12 weather stations that are in LA County. So the calculator. This tool is hopefully going to simplify mechanical ventilation calculations for everyone. There's two main parts, or two main steps. This step one is a calculation that you've already been using in the previous standard, essentially using the age of the home, the number of stories of the home, average ceiling height, conditioned floor area, number of bedrooms, number of occupants, and the blower door number that you get a test out. This will tell you down in the bottom portion of the calculator here whether mechanical ventilation is required or recommended, or if it's not, or if it's neither. So on the next slide, these are just some sample numbers from a project. And as you can see, with the CFM 50 being 69% of BAS, mechanical ventilation is required. That takes you to the next step, which is the 62 to 2013 portion of the calculation. And in the calculator, all of the data that you've entered from the first step is forwarded into this part of the calculator. So in these yellow boxes are the only places you need to enter information. In this section here in the middle, you would enter the location of the existing fans, either a bathroom or a kitchen. You'd enter whether you would enter measured airflow if you chose to measure that airflow, and you would indicate whether each bathroom or kitchen had an operable window. Those credits are, those adjustments are all automatically calculated. The only other piece of information you need to add to the calculator here is the weather station factor that we showed you on a couple of slides ago. That one is a manual lookup. The weather station, you'll have to use some sort of map online or a physical map to indicate what weather station is closest to your project. What you get at the end of this calculator is a whole house mechanical ventilation continuous airflow requirement. That's going to be a CFM number that gives you an indication of the size of the whole house fan that would be required in the home. And the key piece here is that is a continuous airflow requirement. There is an option for using an intermittent fan, and we'll talk about that next. Here's that same part of this. Here's step 2. Let's go back one slide, Danny. Here's that same step 2 of the mechanical air ventilation airflow requirement calculation filled out with information. And as you can see in the middle, in this particular project, the airflow was measured, was not measured for the kitchen, and there was an operable window in the room. As I mentioned before, the required airflow for a kitchen is 100 CFM. Because there was an operable window in the kitchen, there was a 20 CFM credit. That means there was an airflow deficit of 80 CFM. In the bathroom, the first bathroom, the contractor measured the airflow through the bathroom ventilation fan. There was no operable window, and that means that there's an airflow deficit of 15 CFM. As you can see, the calculator is coming up with the answers for all of these. You just need to put in the data that you have in the yellow boxes, and the calculator will do the rest. In this case, the whole house mechanical ventilation airflow requirement was 95 CFM. But we can foresee that some customers may not want continuous mechanical ventilation, meaning on 24 hours a day. There are provisions for reducing the amount of time that mechanical ventilation would be on, but that requires a greater CFM rated fan, and there are certain rules about how often this ventilation needs to operate. The controller that is programmed to operate the fan has to cycle on at least 1 hour every 3 hours, which means that there's a minimum 8 hours per day that whole house mechanical ventilation needs to operate. Again, this calculator just shows all you need to enter is the desired number of hours per day that the ventilation will operate, and the end calculation here will show you the size of the fan that is required for that. So this calculator, Danny, this calculator will be distributed by the program, and hopefully it will be an easy tool for you to use out in the field.
Great. Thank you so much, Neil. Again, this webinar, just to answer some quick questions that were asked, this webinar will be distributed along with the calculator and other supporting documentations that you'll need to kind of be informed about these changes. Like I said, since the Energy Network's offering of home upgrade, we do testing by measure. If you look at your testing by measure chart, basically these impacts only are required for BPI building analyst tests, mainly their combustion safety tests, and those are only required when you are applying for whole building air sealing, attic insulation and plane sealing, windows, and wall insulation. So like I said before, if you're an HVAC contractor and all you decide to do is duct replacement, AC, and furnace, those do not need a BPI building analyst combustion safety test to be done. Therefore, it will not trigger these tests to be done in the home. And as Neil has said, we have created a whole building air sealing calculator. And while you should be using this calculator for doing all these measures listed above, we will only ask for this calculator when you're applying for whole building air sealing, which you should be applying for if you do all of this work. So that's the end of our webinar. If you guys have any additional questions, please feel free to contact us at the Energy Network, and one of your account managers will help you with the process. If you have any questions, again, our chat is still open, so you feel free to type any questions that you have right now, and we will answer them in a separate email. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining today's webinar, and I hope to hear from you guys soon.